This is Edinburgh, a city of two halves. The old town, which is very old, and the new town, which is still pretty old.
Welcome to Scotland Unplugged, and why Edinburgh just might be the real Jekyll and Hyde.
A few years back I made a video about Deacon Ry, the man who inspired Robert Louis Stevenson to write Jekyll and Hyde. A complicated character with some pretty uncomplicated motivations.
It's still one of my favourite videos, even though objectively it's a bit of a mess. At the end of the video, spoiler alert, I suggested that maybe Edinburgh was the real Jekyll and Hyde. This is George Street.
Home of some fine Georgian architecture. It's all very grand and historic, and it's actually smack bang in the middle of the new bit. The new town was built in stages between 1767 and 1850, and it was a bit controversial. But why was it needed at all?
This is the Royal Mile. It runs from Holyrood Palace up to Edinburgh Castle, and it's smack bang in the middle of the old town. You'll notice it's a bit more crowded.
The old town dates back quite a long way. There were people living on top of the castle rock as far back as the Iron Age. You can see the height of the buildings around here.
Some people regard them as the world's first skyscrapers, admittedly mainly people from Edinburgh, and I'm guessing people in Paris and London probably make the same kind of claims about buildings in their towns.
It was crowded, and people lived cheek by jowl, with richer people living on the middle floors and poorer people living above and below, sometimes really below. It wasn't what you'd call a healthy environment.
They used to call this place Old Reekie. They said you could smell it before you saw it, and the word Gardyloo was shouted by people emptying wastewater out of windows into the street.
It's thought to have been a corruption of the French for watch out for the water, although it wasn't just water. It would later go on to morph into the word loo, used by posh people to mean bathroom.
Life in 18th century Edinburgh must have been pretty grim. Just over there in front of me are Princess Street Gardens. All very picturesque these days, but at one time, that was the Norlock, a festering soup of sewage and anything else the city residents cared to throw in there, including suspected witches and dead bodies. It was also used for drinking water.
There was, and actually still is, a stream flowing from one end to the other. These days it's hidden underground, and King James III had that blocked off to create the lock as an extra defensive measure in 1460, because the massive rock the castle sat on clearly wasn't enough. Basically, this whole place was a health hazard. This is Mary King's Close. Once the second longest street in the city, it was sealed off and hidden away. And this is the South Bridge, or what you can see of it. It was built to connect the old High Street, the Royal Mile, to the south. But the buildings either side soon overtook it, leaving dark, vaulted spaces underneath.
The underground streets and vaults were used for some decidedly dodgy purposes. Drinking, gambling, and probably everything else you're thinking of right now. It's not difficult to imagine them as a hidden underworld, and it really wouldn't have been in Stevenson's time.
It gives you an idea of just how layered Edinburgh is, and just what lurks underneath. The idea for a new town was first suggested in the 17th century by the future James VII. He gave the city a grant to create a new regality to the north, including arches and bridges like what we see today.
Some people speculate, because some people always will, that it could have been built back then. But James left the city in 1682, then he became king in 1685, and then he got deposed for being a megalomaniac.
The city fathers eventually decided they needed to build a new town for a couple of reasons.
First of all, the city was crowded and limited by its own walls, which meant, secondly, they were worried that rich people here might head to somewhere more sanitary, like London.
In January 1766, they launched a competition to find a design for their new town. The winner was a 26-year-old architect, James Craig. He kept it simple and followed the contours of the land, designing the streets in a grid pattern. The streets were wider, grander, and a lot less smelly. His original plan hasn't survived, but it's thought it could have been based on a Union flag. The Stuarts had gone and the House of Hanover had taken over. You can sort of tell by the names of the streets. Princes Street, George Street, Frederick Street, Hanover Street, all things that have a connection to the House of Hanover. There was a bit of propaganda involved.
If the old town evolved, this was more planned. And then it grew.
A lot of what we think of today wasn't in the original design. It includes a second new town that included Murray Place, Picardy Place, and newer streets around Calton Hill. Over the years, it's expanded to include the West End, the Murray Estate, etc.
The Norlock was finally drained in 1820 to make way for Princes Street Gardens, which seems like a fair trade. Nowadays, Edinburgh's Old Town and New Town and West End form a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and deservedly so. I live here now, although I'm originally from the southwest of Scotland. My wife's from here and my kids were all born here. So there's not much escaping. I mean, if you have to live in a city, it's not half bad.